In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species cannot escape: the moment when survival demands the ultimate sacrifice. But what happens when that sacrifice involves abandoning the innocent? What happens when the very creatures who claim superiority over humans prove that their hearts are smaller than their minds are large? Deep in the Kepler sector, where three alien empires converge in an uneasy peace, a single act of abandonment is about to reveal why humans have earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn, illogical, and surprisingly effective healers. Sometimes, the measure of a species isn't found in their technology or their weapons, but in what they're willing to do for a creature that can't fight back. This is the story of Dr. Sarah Chen, a human medic who thought she'd seen everything the universe could throw at her. She was wrong. This is the story of Whiskers, a feline companion whose trust in the stars was shattered in the coldest way possible. And this is the story of why, when the rest of the galaxy walks away, humans are the ones who stay behind to fight the impossible fight. Because sometimes, being human means being the species crazy enough to care when caring makes no sense at all. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the viewing port of the medical transport vessel Mercy's hand, watching the swirling green and blue atmosphere of Talonor Prime grow larger beneath them. After 18 months treating wounded soldiers and plague victims across the Outer Rim territories, she'd earned this assignment to the peaceful diplomatic station orbiting the planet. The Talonor system served as neutral ground where the three major alien powers, the insectoid Zathk Collective, the energy-based Veltar Commonwealth, and the aquatic Mirian Federation, conducted their delicate political dances. The space station Harmony's rest appeared ahead, its sleek silver hull reflecting the light of Talonor's twin suns. The structure resembled a massive flower with 6 petals, each section designed to accommodate the environmental needs of different species. Sarah had studied the station's layout during the 3-day journey, memorizing the locations of medical bays, atmospheric controls, and emergency protocols. Her new role as Chief Medical Officer would oversee healthcare for over 12,000 beings from dozens of different species. Approaching Docking Bay 7, announced Captain Torres from the pilot's cabin. "Doc, they're eager to meet you down there." Apparently, they've been without a proper xenobiologist medic for 2 months. Sarah gathered her equipment cases and checked her universal translator one final time. The device, surgically implanted behind her left ear, would automatically translate any of the 47 known galactic languages she might encounter. Her medical scanner, pharmaceutical synthesizer, and emergency surgery kit had been specially modified to work with non-human biology, though she suspected she'd be learning new techniques every day. The docking tube connected with a soft hiss, and Sarah stepped through the airlock into a bustling reception area. The first thing that struck her was the careful environmental balance. The air carried hints of ozone for the Veltar, moisture for the Mirian delegation, and pheromone traces that the Zathk used for communication. Temperature and humidity controls adjusted automatically as different species moved through the space. Commander Velkoth, a towering Veltar being whose body appeared to be made of shifting blue energy contained within a translucent crystalline framework, approached with what Sarah had learned to recognize as a welcoming gesture, a dimming of their natural luminescence. "Dr. Chen, welcome to Harmony's Rest. I am Commander Velkoth, Station Administrator. Your reputation precedes you." Sarah bowed slightly in the traditional human greeting that had become standard diplomatic protocol. "Thank you, Commander. I'm ready to begin immediately." "Excellent. First, allow me to introduce you to your medical team." Velkoth gestured to a group of beings standing nearby. Dr. ZZK Tal from the Collective specializes in parasitic organism research. Dr. Merluna from the Federation handles aquatic physiology and toxicology. They will assist you in understanding the unique medical challenges we face here. Dr. ZZK Tal clicked forward on multiple legs, their chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the station's lighting. Their compound eyes fixed on Sarah with obvious curiosity. "Human medical techniques are unconventional. We are interested to observe your methods." Dr. Merluna flowed closer in her mobility suit filled with saline solution. Her tentacles moved in patterns that the translator interpreted as polite enthusiasm. "Your species' adaptability to treating unknown conditions is remarkable. We have much to learn from each other." Commander Velkoth's form brightened slightly, indicating pleasure at the introductions. "Now, let me show you to your quarters and medical facility." There is one matter we should discuss immediately, a rather unfortunate situation that arose just yesterday. They moved through corridors lined with observation windows offering stunning views of Talon Prime's cloud-swirled surface. The artificial gravity remained constant while the atmospheric composition shifted subtly as they passed through different sections. Sarah noticed how the station's design allowed each species to feel comfortable while maintaining neutral meeting spaces.
What kind of situation? Sarah asked as they entered a transport pod that would carry them to the medical wing.
Velkotha's energy field flickered in what Sarah recognized as discomfort. A companion animal has been abandoned by its caretakers. The creature belongs to the ZAFK diplomatic mission, but they have declared it beyond saving and refused to provide further care. Dr. ZZ Ketal's mandibles clacked in what might have been embarrassment. The creature harbors parasitic organisms that threaten to spread to our primary forms. Standard collective protocol requires immediate disposal of infected companions to prevent contamination.
Disposal?
Sarah's voice carried an edge that made her translator emphasize the emotional content. Dr. Merluna's tentacles curled inward, a gesture of distress. The Federation also voted to remove the creature from the station.
The parasites show adaptability that could threaten our aquatic nurseries.
Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced when military commanders had ordered her to abandon wounded soldiers because treatment would take too long.
What about medical intervention? Surely there are treatments available.
The transport pod arrived at the medical wing, and they stepped into a pristine facility equipped with technology from all three civilizations. Sarah noted with satisfaction that the human medical bay contained equipment she recognized alongside alien devices she'd need to learn.
Commander Velkoth guided them to a secure viewing window overlooking a quarantine chamber.
Inside, on a simple platform beneath harsh sterilization lights, lay a creature that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The animal resembled an earth cat but was roughly twice the size, with 6 legs and, for that shifted between silver and deep purple depending on the angle of the light. Its tail was longer and more prehensile than a terrestrial feline's, and extrasensory whiskers extended from various points on its head and body. But what broke Sarah's heart was the obvious suffering in the creature's large, amber eyes as it lay motionless, breathing labored and shallow.
"This is Zithera," Dr. ZZ Ketal explained with clinical detachment.
"A common companion species from our home worlds. Normally hardy and resistant to most diseases. However, 3 days ago, we discovered it had contracted a parasitic infection that we cannot identify or treat." Sarah moved closer to the viewing window, studying the creature's condition. She could see raised bumps beneath its fur where the parasites had taken hold, and its breathing suggested respiratory distress. The animal's eyes tracked movement weakly, showing it was still aware but clearly in significant pain. "What treatments have been attempted?" she asked. Dr. Merluna's suit hummed as she accessed her records.
"Standard anti-parasitic medications from all 3 civilizations. Electromagnetic field treatments.
Surgical removal was attempted but the organisms appear to be integrated with the nervous system. Each treatment failed, and several actually worsened the creature's condition."
"The parasites adapt," Dr. ZZ Ketal added.
"They analyze each treatment and modify their defenses accordingly. Within hours, they become immune to whatever method was used against them."
Sarah watched as Zithera tried to lift its head, managing only a few inches before exhaustion forced it back down.
The creature made a soft sound that needed no translation, pure misery and confusion, wondering why the beings it had trusted were no longer coming to comfort it.
"How long until the disposal?" Sarah asked quietly. Commander Velkotha's energy field dimmed to barely visible levels.
6 hours. Station security will collect the creature and jettison it into space. The quarantine chamber will then be sterilized and sealed.
6 hours.
Sarah placed her palm against the viewing window. And the 3 most advanced civilizations in the galaxy have given up.
"Dr. Chen," Dr. ZZ Ketal's voice carried a warning tone.
"The creature is beyond saving. The parasites will kill it within days regardless of intervention. Our priority must be preventing spread to the station population."
"This is logical."
"Logical," Sarah repeated, watching as Zithera's ears twitched at the sound of voices it couldn't quite locate.
You're right, of course. It would be logical to give up. Logical to prioritize the many over the few. Logical to accept that some problems don't have solutions. She turned to face the three alien medical officers, her expression calm but her eyes burning with determination. But, you made one mistake when you invited a human to serve as your chief medical officer. You see, humans have this terrible habit of being completely illogical when it comes to giving up on patients. We have this stupid tendency to keep fighting even when the smart money says we should walk away. Dr. Merluna's tentacles curled with interest. You believe you can succeed where we have failed? I believe I can try where you've stopped trying, Sarah corrected. Commander, I'm officially requesting permission to treat this patient. Velkatha's form flickered between various intensities as they processed this request. Dr. Chen, you understand that failure is almost certain? That the risk of infection spreading could jeopardize thousands of beings? I understand the risks. I also understand that letting this creature die alone and afraid because we're too scared to try is exactly the kind of thing that makes other species think humans are crazy. Sarah's smile was grim but determined. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are crazy enough to care when caring makes no sense. She looked back at Zithara, who had somehow managed to turn its head toward the sound of her voice. For just a moment, their eyes met through the transparent barrier. But, that's not a bug in human nature, Commander. It's a feature. Dr. ZZKTal's compound eyes shifted focus rapidly, a sign of agitation. The protocols are clear. Infected companions must be disposed of to protect the collective. Your protocols, Sarah said, already moving toward the quarantine chamber's entry controls. My patient. The next few hours would determine whether human stubbornness was enough to overcome alien parasites, impossible odds, and the collective wisdom of 3 galactic civilizations. Sarah Chen had faced worse odds before, but never with such a clear understanding that she was about to prove either the best or the worst of human nature to the watching galaxy. As she began entering the security codes to access the quarantine chamber, she could feel the weight of alien eyes upon her, judging, measuring, wondering if the human's reputation for impossible rescues was deserved or just elaborate myth-making. Zithara made another soft sound from within the chamber, and Sarah's resolve hardened into something that would have impressed the toughest military commanders she'd served alongside. Time to show them what humans do when everyone else has given up. The quarantine chamber's seals began to cycle open, and Sarah Chen stepped forward into what her alien colleagues were certain would be either a miraculous breakthrough or a catastrophic demonstration of human foolishness. She was betting everything on it being both. The quarantine chamber's atmospheric processors hummed to life as Sarah stepped through the airlock, automatically adjusting the environment for human physiology while maintaining the sterile conditions necessary for containing the unknown parasites. Her medical scanner beeped softly as it registered the presence of foreign organisms in the air, but the readings remained within acceptable exposure limits. Zithara raised its head as Sarah approached, amber eyes focusing on this new presence with a mixture of hope and wariness. The creature had learned to associate visitors with painful medical procedures, but something in Sarah's movements, slow, non-threatening, accompanied by soft vocalizations, seemed to communicate different intentions. "Hello, beautiful," Sarah whispered, settling into a crouch several feet away from the platform. "I know you don't understand my words, but maybe you can understand my meaning. I'm here to help, not to hurt you." The feline companion's ears swiveled toward her voice, and its breathing seemed to stabilize slightly at the calming tone. Sarah activated her medical scanner and began taking readings from a distance, not wanting to stress the already suffering animal with physical contact until she better understood its condition. The initial scans revealed a horror that made Sarah's stomach clench. The parasites weren't simply attached to Zithara's body, they had integrated themselves into the creature's nervous system, circulatory system, and even its brain tissue. Microscopic organisms flowed through every major biological pathway, creating a secondary network that paralleled the animal's natural physiology. "My God," Sarah breathed, watching the scanner display update with increasingly complex data. "You're not just infected. You're hosting an entire ecosystem." Through the viewing window, she could see Dr. ZZKTal and Dr. Merluna observing her every movement. Commander Velkoth had positioned themselves where they could monitor both the medical bay and receive updates from station security.
The weight of their expectations and their certainty of failure pressed against Sarah's shoulders like a physical burden. She activated her communication link to address her alien colleagues while keeping her voice soft enough not to disturb Zithera. I'm seeing integration patterns that are far more sophisticated than anything in your reports. These parasites aren't just opportunistic invaders. They're forming a symbiotic relationship with the host. Dr. Merluna's tentacles curled with interest as her voice came through Sarah's translator. Impossible. Our analysis showed clear parasitic behavior with progressive tissue damage and eventual host death. Your analysis was looking at the wrong timeframe, Sarah replied, moving closer to Zithera with slow, careful steps. You were measuring immediate effects without considering long-term adaptation patterns. She knelt beside the platform and extended her hand, palm up, allowing the suffering creature to decide whether to accept contact. Zithera sniffed cautiously, then pressed its nose against Sarah's fingers with a soft purr that vibrated through its chest despite its obvious pain. The moment of contact allowed Sarah's more sensitive medical scanners to interface directly with the creature's biological systems. What she discovered made her gasp in wonder and horror simultaneously. The parasites aren't killing Zithera, she announced to her observing colleagues. They're trying to save themselves by keeping the host alive. But they're failing because they don't understand feline physiology well enough to integrate properly. Dr. ZZ Ketal's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. Elaborate on this theory, human. Sarah gently stroked Zithera's head, noting how the creature's purring intensified at the contact. The organisms show adaptive intelligence, right? Every treatment you tried, they modified to resist within hours. That level of rapid evolution suggests they're not just parasites, they're refugees. She stood and activated a holographic display that showed the scan data in 3 dimensions, the parasitic network visible as a ghostly overlay on Zithera's normal anatomy. The alien doctors leaned closer to their monitoring screens as Sarah highlighted specific patterns in the data. Look at the integration points. They're trying to establish symbiotic relationships with major organ systems, but the biological incompatibility is causing cascade failures. The pain and tissue damage aren't deliberate parasitic feeding, they're mistakes. Dr. Merluna's form shifted in her mobility suit as she processed this information. You're suggesting these organisms evolved to form beneficial partnerships with host species? More than that, Sarah said, her excitement building as the pieces fell into place. I think they're dying too. Their home biology is so different from Zithera's that they can't properly interface. They're trying to help their host survive while ensuring their own continuation, but they lack the knowledge to do it correctly. Through the viewing window, she could see Commander Velkatha's energy form brightening with interest. If your hypothesis is correct, Dr. Chen, what does this suggest for treatment? Sarah turned back to Zithera, who had managed to sit up partway and was watching her with obvious intelligence. The creature's eyes followed her movements, and when she resumed stroking its fur, it leaned into the contact with desperate gratitude. It suggests that we're approaching this backwards. Instead of trying to kill the parasites, we need to teach them how to integrate properly. They're not malicious, they're incompetent. And incompetence can be educated. The silence that followed this statement stretched for several long minutes. Sarah could almost hear the alien minds processing concepts that challenged fundamental assumptions about parasitic relationships and medical treatment protocols. Dr. ZZ Ketal broke the silence first. Human, your proposal borders on fantasy. How does one educate microscopic organisms? Sarah's smile was grim but determined as she activated her pharmaceutical synthesizer and began entering complex molecular formulations. The same way you teach any confused entity trying to help but making mistakes. You show them the correct way and provide the tools to implement it. She began preparing a series of compounds that made her alien colleagues exchange what were clearly skeptical communications. Instead of anti-parasitic medications, Sarah was synthesizing biological compatibility enhancers, neural interface stabilizers, and cellular communication facilitators. Dr. Chen, Dr. Merluna's voice carried clear concern. Those compounds will strengthen the parasitic integration, not eliminate it. Exactly. Sarah loaded the first syringe and moved back to Zithera's platform. If they want to be symbiotic partners instead of accidental killers, I'm going to help them learn how. The creature's trust in her had grown during their brief interaction, and it remained calm as Sarah administered the first injection. Her scanners immediately began registering changes at the cellular level as the compatibility enhancers started providing the parasites with biological templates for proper integration.
This is unprecedented, Commander Velkoff observed. No civilization has ever attempted to assist parasitic integration.
Because no civilization has ever been crazy enough to ask whether the parasites might want to be helpful instead of harmful, Sarah replied, preparing the second injection. Humans have this terrible habit of assuming good intentions even when evidence suggests otherwise. Zithera's breathing began to ease as the neural interface stabilizers took effect, reducing the chaotic signal conflicts that had been causing so much pain. The creature's eyes brightened, and it attempted to stand for the first time in days, managing to hold the position for several seconds before settling back down. Dr. ZZ Ketal's compound eyes focused intently on the scanner readings.
Impossible.
The tissue inflammation is decreasing.
How are you achieving this?
I'm giving both species what they need to communicate properly, Sarah explained, administering the final injection in the initial series. Zithera's immune system has been fighting the integration because it doesn't recognize the parasite's attempts to form beneficial connections. The organisms have been trying to help with circulation, neural processing, and toxin filtering, but they've been doing it wrong. She watched as her scanners showed the parasitic network beginning to establish more stable connections with Zithera's biological systems. The chaotic interference patterns that had characterized the infection were smoothing into more organized waveforms. The cellular communication facilitators are providing a common language between host and symbiont, she continued. Instead of random integration attempts causing tissue damage, the parasites can now receive feedback about what's helpful and what's harmful. Zithera suddenly lifted its head and made a sound that was distinctly different from its previous expressions of pain, a warbling call that resonated through multiple tones simultaneously. The creature's eyes were brighter than they had been since its arrival at the station, and its breathing had normalized.
That vocalization pattern, Dr. Merluna observed with obvious amazement. I've never heard anything like it from this species. Sarah smiled as understanding dawned. Because it's not just Zithera making that sound.
The parasites are contributing their own communication abilities. They're harmonizing with their host's vocal cords to create something neither species could produce alone. The implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in for the alien observers.
This wasn't just successful medical treatment, it was the birth of a new form of hybrid consciousness.
Dr. ZZ Ketal's mandibles clacked in rapid sequence, indicating intense cognitive processing.
You have created a composite organism. The ethical implications are staggering.
I haven't created anything, Sarah corrected, gently examining Zithera's response to the treatment. I've simply helped two species find a way to coexist that benefits both.
The parasites get a stable host environment that allows them to survive and reproduce.
Zithera gets enhanced sensory capabilities, improved toxin resistance, and accelerated healing.
Commander Velkotha's energy form pulsed with what Sarah was learning to recognize as deep contemplation. Dr.
Chen, if your treatment is successful, you will have demonstrated an entirely new approach to parasitic relationships.
The implications for medical science across all our civilizations could be revolutionary.
Sarah continued monitoring the integration process as Zithera grew stronger by the hour. The creature had managed to stand and was now exploring the confines of the quarantine chamber with obvious curiosity.
Its movements were more fluid than before, and its sensory awareness seemed dramatically enhanced.
The revolution isn't in the medicine, Commander, she said quietly. It's in the assumptions we make about conflict and cooperation. Your civilization saw invaders that needed to be destroyed. I saw refugees that needed help finding a home. Dr. Merluna's tentacles moved in patterns of wonder.
And both species benefit from this arrangement?
Look at the data, Sarah replied, gesturing to the scanner displays that showed steadily improving biological functions in both organisms.
Zithera's immune system is stronger, its neural processing is enhanced, and its physical capabilities are improving beyond baseline normal for its species.
The parasites have achieved stable reproduction and distribution throughout an ideal host environment. Zithera approached the viewing window and pressed its face against the transparent barrier, looking directly at the alien doctors who had been prepared to dispose of it hours earlier. The creature's expression was alert and intelligent, but there was something more, a depth of awareness that seemed to encompass multiple levels of consciousness. "It's looking at us differently," Dr. ZZK Tal observed with obvious unease. "The intelligence behind those eyes has changed." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and profound responsibility for what she had facilitated. Zithara now has access to the collective intelligence of billions of microscopic organisms. Its problem-solving capabilities, pattern recognition, and sensory processing have been exponentially enhanced. But it's still fundamentally the same creature, just with better tools for understanding the world. The creature made another of its complex harmonic calls, and this time the sound carried clear emotional content that transcended species barriers. Gratitude, wonder, and something that might have been forgiveness for the abandonment it had experienced. "The question now," Sarah continued, "is what we do with this success. Do we present it as a medical curiosity, or do we acknowledge that we've discovered something that could change how every species in the galaxy approaches biological cooperation?" The weight of that question settled over the medical bay like a physical presence, carrying implications that reached far beyond a single rescued companion animal. 26 hours after Sarah's initial treatment, Harmony's rest had become the center of unprecedented scientific attention. Representatives from all three major civilizations had arrived on emergency transport vessels, demanding answers, explanations, and access to what some were calling either a medical breakthrough or a biological disaster. Sarah stood in the main conference chamber, watching through the massive viewing wall as ships from the Zathke Collective, Veltar Commonwealth, and Mirian Federation assumed defensive positions around the station. The political implications of her success were becoming as complex as the medical ones. Dr. Chen, Admiral Zizi Kevath of the Collective Fleet announced through the Chamber's communication system, "You will immediately surrender the contaminated creature for proper disposal. Your interference has created an uncontrolled biological weapon." Sarah activated her response channel, keeping her voice calm despite the fury building in her chest. "Admiral, the creature in question is a patient under my care, showing remarkable improvement from a terminal condition. There is no biological weapon here." High Chancellor Velneth of the Commonwealth flickered into the chamber through their quantum projection system, their energy form casting blue shadows across the assembled delegates. "Dr. Chen, our scientists report that the organism has exceeded normal baseline capabilities by 340%. Such enhancement represents a clear violation of natural biological limits." "With respect, High Chancellor," Sarah replied, "enhanced capability isn't the same as weaponization. Zithara remains fundamentally the same creature, simply healthier than before." Fleet Commander Merdanth of the Federation attended via a specialized aquatic communication pod, her tentacles moving in agitated patterns. "The implications of symbiotic enhancement could destabilize the biological balance of entire ecosystems. This experiment must be contained before it spreads." Commander Velkoff entered the chamber, their form dimmed with obvious stress. "Esteemed representatives, perhaps we should examine the actual results before making determinations about containment or disposal." Sarah gestured toward the conference room's main display, which showed real-time monitoring data from Zithara's ongoing examination. "The creature has been stable for over a day. Biological integration is complete, and there are no signs of parasitic spread or host rejection. Both organisms are thriving in ways that benefit each other." Dr. Zizi Ketal, who had been observing the political proceedings with obvious discomfort, stepped forward to address their admiral. "Respected Admiral Zizi Kevath, the medical data supports Dr. Chen's conclusions. The parasitic organisms show no intention of seeking additional hosts. They appear to have found their optimal symbiotic environment." Admiral Zizi Kevath's compound eyes fixed on their subordinate with clear displeasure. "Dr. Zizi Ketal, your role is to provide medical analysis, not political interpretation. The collective's position remains unchanged: contaminated creatures must be eliminated to protect the greater population." Sarah felt the familiar burn of frustration that came whenever bureaucracy threatened to override medical necessity. "Admiral, with respect, you're making decisions based on fear rather than evidence. Zithara poses no threat to anyone. And how can you guarantee this, human?" High Chancellor Velnetha's energy form brightened aggressively. Your species is known for emotional decision-making that ignores logical risk assessment. The accusation hit exactly the nerve Sarah had expected it would. She'd been hearing variations of it throughout her career. Humans are too emotional, too attached, too willing to take risks for individual patients when the logical choice would prioritize statistical outcomes. You're absolutely right, High Chancellor, she said, surprising everyone in the chamber. Humans do make emotional decisions. We do get attached to individual patients. We do take illogical risks to save lives that statistics say aren't worth saving. She activated the chamber's holographic display system and called up footage from Zithera's quarantine chamber. The creature was visible, moving with fluid grace as it explored its environment, its enhanced awareness obvious in every movement. But our emotional attachment to individual lives has led us to discover treatments that your logical approach dismissed as impossible. Your three civilizations, with all their advanced technology and rational decision-making, had given up on this patient. One human medic, operating on emotional attachment and illogical hope, found a solution that benefits both organisms. Fleet Commander Merdentha's tentacles curled with obvious agitation. One success does not justify the risks involved in such reckless experimentation. Then, let me show you something that might change your perspective, Sarah replied, activating a communication link to the quarantine chamber. Zithera, can you demonstrate your enhanced capabilities for our guests? The creature's image appeared on the main display as it responded to Sarah's voice. Instead of simple animal acknowledgement, Zithera approached the chamber's computer interface and began manipulating the controls with its prehensile tail, activating displays and accessing data files with obvious intelligence. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives watched a creature that had been considered a simple companion animal navigate complex technological systems with ease. Zithera accessed the station's botanical database and began displaying information about plant species from its home world, identifying toxic varieties and their antidotes with precision that surprised even the collective's medical experts. Impossible, Admiral Zizi Kavoth whispered. Companions do not possess such intellectual capacity. They do now, Sarah replied. The parasitic organisms haven't just enhanced Zithera's physical capabilities. They've provided access to their collective intelligence and data processing abilities. The creature can now analyze complex chemical compounds, identify biological threats, and process information at rates that rival your best computer systems. Dr. Merluna, who had been quietly observing from her position near the aquatic communication systems, moved forward with obvious excitement. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that this symbiotic relationship could be replicated in other species? The question hung in the air like a live electrical charge. Sarah looked around the chamber at representatives of three civilizations, each grappling with the implications of voluntary biological enhancement through symbiotic partnership. I'm suggesting, Sarah said carefully, that we've discovered a form of biological cooperation that transcends traditional predator-prey or host-parasite relationships. Instead of fighting biological invasion, we've learned to facilitate biological collaboration. High Chancellor Velnetha's energy form flickered rapidly as they processed this concept. The philosophical implications are staggering. You're describing voluntary evolution guided by conscious choice rather than environmental pressure. Commander Velkoth brightened with sudden understanding. Dr. Chen, you've essentially mediated a biological treaty between two species that allows mutual benefit without conquest or domination. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. And, before you ask, yes, the process could potentially be adapted for other species combinations. But, it would require abandoning the assumption that all biological integration is automatically hostile. Admiral Zizi Kavatha's mandibles clacked in rapid sequence, a sign of intense cognitive processing. You're proposing that our entire approach to parasitic infections has been fundamentally flawed? I'm proposing that not all biological invasion is conquest, Sarah corrected. Sometimes it's refugees seeking sanctuary, immigrants looking for opportunity, or partners seeking collaboration. The key is learning to tell the difference and responding appropriately. Zithera, still visible on the main display, had moved to the chamber's communication panel and was producing its harmonic vocalizations directly into the microphone system. The sounds that emerged were hauntingly beautiful, complex musical phrases that seemed to carry emotional content beyond simple communication. Dr.
ZZ Keitel translated the creature's vocalizations with obvious wonder.
It's expressing gratitude for the opportunity to become more than it was before. The parasitic consciousness is harmonizing to express joy at finding a home where it can contribute rather than simply survive. Fleet Commander Merdentha's tentacles had stilled completely, a sign of profound contemplation among her species.
Dr. Chen, if this process could be safely adapted, the implications for biological enhancement and species cooperation could revolutionize interstellar civilization. Sarah nodded, then held up a cautionary hand.
But only if we approach it with the same care and individual attention that saved Zithera.
This isn't something that can be mass-produced or implemented through standard protocols.
Each situation would require careful analysis, patient communication, and willingness to accept that some attempts might fail.
Failure could mean death for both host and symbiont, Admiral ZZ Kaboth pointed out.
And success could mean evolution beyond what either species could achieve alone, Sarah countered. The question is whether we're brave enough to try, or whether we're going to let fear drive our decisions.
High Chancellor Velnetha's form dimmed to barely visible levels as they contemplated the choice before them.
Dr. Chen, you're asking us to fundamentally reconsider our understanding of biological relationships and medical intervention.
I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's more than one way for different species to coexist, Sarah replied.
Zithera and its symbionts have shown us that cooperation can be more powerful than conquest, that integration doesn't have to mean domination, and that sometimes the most logical thing to do is trust in illogical hope. The creature on the display had settled into a comfortable position and was producing soft harmonic sounds that seemed designed purely for beauty rather than communication. The music filled the conference chamber with an otherworldly melody that spoke to something deeper than language. Commander Velkoth brightened gradually as they made what was clearly a difficult decision.
Dr. Chen, you have 48 hours to prepare a detailed protocol for symbiotic integration therapy. If your methods can be safely replicated, the three civilizations will consider establishing a joint research program. Sarah felt a surge of triumph mixed with overwhelming responsibility. And Zithera? Admiral ZZ Kavatha's compound eyes focused on the creature's image as it continued its peaceful music-making. The creature will remain under medical observation pending the outcome of your research.
If successful, it may become the first citizen of what could be an entirely new classification of sapient life. The conference chamber fell quiet except for Zithera's harmonious songs, as representatives of three civilizations grappled with the possibility that a human medic's emotional illogic might have opened the door to a future where biological cooperation replaced biological warfare. Sarah watched the creature that had started as an abandoned dying animal and was now potentially the herald of a new age of interspecies evolution. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important discoveries came not from advanced technology or logical analysis, but from the simple human refusal to give up on someone who needed help. Now came the hard part, proving that human emotional illogic could be transformed into reproducible scientific methodology without losing the heart that made it work in the first place. 36 hours into her 48-hour deadline, Sarah stood in the newly established symbiotic research laboratory, surrounded by the most advanced biological analysis equipment that three civilizations could provide on short notice. The lab hummed with activity as teams of researchers from all major species worked around the clock to understand and document the process that had saved Zithera. The creature itself had become an enthusiastic participant in the research, demonstrating enhanced capabilities that continued to amaze the scientific teams. Zithera could now process multiple data streams simultaneously, solve complex puzzles that challenged even trained researchers, and communicate with both its original vocalizations and the harmonic combinations produced through symbiotic integration. Dr. Chen, Dr. ZZ Keitel called out from the main analysis station, "We've completed the neural mapping of the symbiotic interface. The parasitic organisms have established what can only be described as a secondary processing network that operates in parallel with the host's original neural pathways." Sarah moved to examine the holographic brain scan that showed Zithera's enhanced nervous system. The original neural structure appeared intact and healthy, but was now interwoven with a network of microscopically small parasitic organisms that formed their own information processing matrix. "It's like they've created a biological computer that interfaces directly with Zithera's consciousness," she observed. "The host retains full autonomy and original personality, but has access to enhanced processing power and memory storage." Dr. Merluna flowed over from the chemical analysis section, her tentacles displaying patterns of excitement.
The biochemical integration is equally fascinating.
The parasites are producing compounds that enhance the host's immune system, accelerate healing, and improve cellular efficiency.
They're not just sharing consciousness, they're optimizing biology.
Sarah nodded, making notes on her portable datapad as she began formulating the protocol that might allow this process to be safely replicated. The key challenges were becoming clear: ensuring compatibility between host and symbiont biology, establishing communication pathways for consent and cooperation, and preventing harmful integration that could damage either organism.
Commander Velkoth materialized near the main display console, their energy form brightening with curiosity.
Dr. Chen, our preliminary testing suggests that not all parasitic organisms show the same cooperative potential.
How do you propose to identify suitable candidates for symbiotic integration? That's exactly what I'm working on, Sarah replied, activating a presentation that displayed her developing protocol.
We need to establish screening criteria that can distinguish between genuinely parasitic organisms and, potentially, symbiotic ones. The presentation showed a complex flowchart detailing biological markers, behavioral patterns, and integration responses that could indicate symbiotic potential.
Sarah had been working with teams from all three civilizations to identify characteristics that transcended species boundaries.
First criterion, adaptive intelligence, she explained, highlighting relevant sections of the protocol. True parasites show limited adaptability focused only on host exploitation. Potential symbionts demonstrate learning behaviors and responses to host welfare. Zithera's parasites modified their integration patterns based on feedback from the host's biological systems.
Dr. ZZ Katel's compound eyes focused intently on the data. Second criterion appears to be reciprocal benefit.
The organisms must provide measurable advantages to the host, not simply avoid causing harm.
Exactly, Sarah confirmed. And, third, reversibility. The integration must be structured so that both species can survive separation if the relationship becomes detrimental. This prevents the symbiotic relationship from becoming a form of biological slavery.
High Chancellor Velnetha's quantum projection materialized in the laboratory, their energy form casting blue highlights across the research equipment.
Dr. Chen, your protocol addresses the technical aspects of integration, but what about the ethical considerations? How do we ensure informed consent from species that may lack the cognitive capacity to understand the implications?
The question struck at the heart of Sarah's concerns about expanding the symbiotic integration process. She'd been struggling with the ethics of facilitating biological partnerships that could fundamentally alter the nature of consciousness and identity. That's why the protocol requires extensive communication establishment before any integration attempts, she replied, activating a new section of her presentation. We need to develop reliable methods for explaining the process and obtaining genuine consent from both potential host and symbiont. Zithera approached the group, moving with the fluid grace that had become characteristic since its enhancement. The creature positioned itself near Sarah and began producing complex vocalizations that the translation systems interpreted as a request to participate in the discussion. Zithera wants to contribute its perspective to the protocol development, Sarah announced, activating the communication interface that allowed the enhanced creature to interact with the laboratory's computer systems. The creature accessed the presentation display and began adding annotations and modifications to Sarah's protocol draft. Its contributions revealed a level of insight that surprised even the research teams who had been working with it for days.
Fascinating, Dr. Merluna observed.
The creature is suggesting modifications to the consent protocols based on its experience of the integration process.
It's providing perspective that none of us could have anticipated.
Zithera's additions to the protocol emphasized the importance of gradual integration that allowed both species to adjust to their new shared existence. The creature detailed the subjective experience of consciousness expansion and the challenges of maintaining individual identity while accessing collective intelligence.
Admiral ZZ Kevatha's voice came through the laboratory's communication system as he monitored the research progress remotely. Dr. Chen, the collective's review committee requires assurance that this process cannot be weaponized or used for involuntary biological modification.
Sarah paused her work to address the Admiral's concerns directly.
Admiral, the protocol includes multiple safeguards against weaponization.
The process requires willing cooperation from both organisms, extensive biological compatibility testing, and ongoing monitoring to ensure mutual benefit. It cannot be forced or imposed against the will of either species. Additionally, she continued, the integration enhances both organisms in ways that make them more valuable as partners than as weapons. Weaponization would destroy the very cooperation that makes the process successful. Fleet Commander Merdentha's image appeared on one of the laboratory's monitoring screens. Dr. Chen, what about the concern that enhanced individuals might gain unfair advantages over non-enhanced members of their species? It was a question Sarah had been expecting but dreading. The implications of voluntary biological enhancement could create new forms of inequality and social stratification that might prove more divisive than helpful. The protocol addresses this by requiring that any successful integration process be made freely available to all members of compatible species, she replied. No one civilization or group can monopolize access to symbiotic enhancement. It has to be a choice available to everyone, or it becomes a tool for oppression rather than cooperation. Dr. Zizi Keital moved closer to examine the latest version of the protocol as Zithera continued to add modifications and refinements. Dr. Chen, the creature is suggesting that symbiotic integration might actually reduce conflict between species by providing shared experiences that transcend traditional biological boundaries. Sarah studied Zithera's additions and felt a surge of understanding about the broader implications of what they were developing. The creature is right. Individuals who have experienced successful symbiotic integration would have direct knowledge of what it means to cooperate across species barriers. They could serve as bridges between civilizations. Commander Velkoff brightened significantly as they processed this concept. Symbiotic integration could create a new class of beings whose very existence demonstrates the possibility of peaceful interspecies cooperation. The laboratory fell silent as everyone present contemplated the revolutionary potential of what they were discussing. They weren't just developing a medical treatment, they were potentially creating the foundation for a new form of interstellar diplomacy based on biological cooperation rather than political negotiation. Zithera produced a series of harmonic calls that seemed designed to capture everyone's attention, then accessed the communication interface to add a final section to the protocol. The addition made Sarah's breath catch in her throat as she read it. The creature is proposing the establishment of symbiotic integration centers throughout known space, she announced. Places where species can come to explore compatibility and undergo the process safely. It's suggesting a network of facilities dedicated to fostering biological cooperation. High Chancellor Velnetha's energy form flickered rapidly as they processed the implications. Dr. Chen, your patient has essentially proposed the creation of a new interstellar institution dedicated to voluntary evolution through biological partnership. Sarah looked at Zithera, who had settled into a comfortable position and was watching the assembled researchers with obvious intelligence and patience. The creature that had been abandoned as a dying burden had become the architect of a possible future where biological diversity was a source of strength rather than conflict. The protocol is complete, she announced, transmitting the final document to all three civilization representatives. It includes technical procedures, ethical safeguards, consent protocols, and implementation guidelines for establishing symbiotic integration as a medical and social option throughout known space. Admiral Zizi Kevatha's voice carried a note of what might have been wonder. Dr. Chen, you have 12 hours remaining in your deadline, yet you've produced a document that could reshape biological relationships across the galaxy. I had help, Sarah replied, gently stroking Zithera's head as the creature purred with harmonic overtones that spoke of contentment and purpose. From a patient who refused to stay just a patient, and became a teacher instead. The next 12 hours would determine whether the galaxy was ready for a future where biological cooperation replaced biological warfare, where symbiotic integration offered an alternative to the eternal struggles between species, and where a dying creature's rescue had opened the door to voluntary evolution. Sarah Chen had come to Harmony's Rest to serve as a medical officer. Instead, she'd become the midwife to a new age of interspecies biological cooperation, with an enhanced feline companion as her guide and co-architect. The universe, she reflected, had a sense of humor about human plans. 6 months after the first successful symbiotic integration, Harmony's Rest had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, the first interspecies biological cooperation institute. Ships from dozens of civilizations maintain steady traffic to and from the station, bringing beings who sought to explore the possibilities of voluntary symbiotic enhancement. Sarah stood in her new office, watching through the massive viewing port as construction crews from multiple species worked together to expand the station's facilities. The sight still amazed her. Zathke engineers working alongside Veltar energy technicians and Mirian bioarchitects, their cooperation facilitated by several dozen enhanced individuals who could communicate effectively across species boundaries. Dr. Chen, Zithara's voice came through the room's communication system, the creature's enhanced intelligence allowing it to operate the station's computer networks with ease. The morning consultation schedule is ready for your review. Sarah smiled as she accessed the schedule on her personal data pad. In the months since achieving symbiotic integration, Zithara had become not just her partner in developing new protocols, but an essential member of the medical team. The creature's unique perspective as a successfully integrated being made it invaluable for counseling potential candidates and guiding integration procedures. Thank you, Zithara. How many new arrival interviews do we have today? 17, the creature replied, its harmonized vocalizations carrying notes of excitement and anticipation. Including 3 species we haven't worked with before. A crystalline silicon-based civilization from the Andromeda Spiral Arm, a collective hivemind species from the Outer Rim, and a group of energy beings similar to the Veltar but from a completely different evolutionary path. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of excitement and responsibility that came with each new species contact. Every successful integration brought new possibilities and new challenges, requiring constant adaptation of their protocols and procedures. The door to her office chimed, and Dr. Zizi Ketal entered, followed by Dr. Merluna and Commander Velkoth. The 3 alien colleagues who had initially observed her desperate attempt to save a dying creature had become her closest collaborators in developing the science of symbiotic integration. Dr. Chen, Dr. Zizi Ketal began, their compound eyes focusing with obvious excitement. The latest statistical analysis of our integration success rates shows remarkable progress. We've achieved a 94% compatibility rate for pre-screened candidates, with no harmful integration attempts in the past 60 days. Dr. Merluna's tentacles moved in patterns of satisfaction as she added her report. The long-term stability studies are equally encouraging. All integrated beings show continued health improvement and enhanced capabilities without any degradation in their original biological functions. Commander Velkotha's energy form brightened as they delivered their contribution to the morning briefing. Political response from the major civilizations continues to be positive. The Collective Council, Commonwealth Assembly, and Federation Senate have all voted to establish permanent funding for symbiotic integration research and facilities. Sarah nodded, reviewing the compiled data on her display screens. The numbers told an extraordinary story of biological cooperation that was reshaping galactic civilization. More than 3,000 beings had successfully undergone symbiotic integration, creating a growing population of enhanced individuals who served as bridges between species and living proof of the possibilities for biological cooperation. What about the new species contacts? She asked. Any preliminary compatibility assessments? Zithara materialized in the office through the personal transport system that had been installed to accommodate the creature's new role as a mobile consultant. The being's enhanced grace and intelligence remained startling even after months of daily interaction. I've conducted initial interviews with all 3 new species delegations, Zithara reported, settling into the specially designed platform that allowed it to interact with the office's computer systems. The crystalline species shows excellent potential. Their parasitic organisms are actually mineral-based entities that could enhance their host's structural integrity and environmental resistance. The Hivemind Collective presents interesting challenges, the creature continued, its harmonic vocalizations carrying complex emotional overtones. They're seeking integration partners that could provide individual consciousness capabilities to complement their collective awareness. Their parasitic candidates are actually isolated consciousness fragments seeking reconnection with biological hosts. Dr. Merluna's tentacles curled with fascination. Consciousness integration rather than biological enhancement? That's an entirely new category of symbiotic relationship. And the energy beings? Sarah prompted. Zithara's form seemed to shimmer with excitement as it replied. They may represent the most revolutionary possibility yet. Their parasites are actually temporal entities, organisms that exist partially outside normal time flow. Integration could provide hosts with limited time perception abilities and enhanced pattern recognition across temporal dimensions. The implications of what Zithara was describing made Sarah's mind race with possibilities and concerns. Temporal integration could provide unprecedented advantages, but also carried risks that were difficult to assess or prepare for.
Commander Velkov flickered between various intensity levels as they processed this information.
Dr. Chen, temporal integration could provide strategic advantages that might destabilize the balance of power between civilizations.
How do we ensure that such capabilities don't become tools for political domination?
The same way we've handled all the previous enhancements, Sarah replied.
Open access, voluntary participation, and shared benefits.
No one species or civilization gets exclusive access to any form of symbiotic integration.
Dr. ZZK mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Dr. Chen, we should also consider the cumulative effects of multiple integration types.
Some of our enhanced individuals are expressing interest in secondary integrations with different symbiotic species. Sarah had been expecting this development but wasn't entirely sure how to address it. The possibility of beings who hosted multiple symbiotic species simultaneously opened up questions about identity, consciousness, and the practical limits of biological cooperation.
Zithara, she asked, what's your perspective on multiple integrations?
The enhanced creature's response carried complex harmonic overtones that suggested deep contemplation.
I believe careful multiple integration could create beings with capabilities that transcend anything we've seen before.
Imagine individuals with enhanced biological function, expanded consciousness, and temporal perception working together.
They could solve problems that no single species could address.
They could also become so fundamentally different from their origin species that they form an entirely new classification of life, Dr. Merluna pointed out. The social and political implications could be enormous. Sarah stood and activated the office's main display, calling up a galactic map that showed the locations of successful symbiotic integration facilities that had been established based on their protocols. The network of cooperation that had grown from a single desperate medical intervention now spanned dozens of star systems. 6 months ago, I treated what everyone else considered a dying animal carrying incurable parasites, she said, looking at each of her colleagues and, then, at Zithara. Today, we're discussing the possibility of creating beings with capabilities that could reshape galactic civilization. She paused, considering the weight of responsibility that came with such possibilities.
The question isn't whether we can facilitate these integrations.
The question is whether we're wise enough to guide their development in ways that benefit everyone rather than creating new forms of inequality or conflict. Zithara approached Sarah's position and produced a series of harmonic calls that seemed designed to capture everyone's attention. The creature then accessed the main display and began showing data from integration facilities throughout the galaxy.
Look at what's actually happening, Zithara's translated communication urged. Enhanced individuals aren't seeking to dominate their origin species.
They're working to bridge differences, solve problems, and facilitate cooperation.
Every successful integration creates someone who understands biological diversity as a source of strength.
The display showed statistical analyses of enhanced individual behavior patterns, showing overwhelmingly positive contributions to interspecies cooperation and conflict resolution. Enhanced beings were consistently choosing roles that facilitated communication and collaboration between different civilizations.
Dr. ZZK studied the data with obvious amazement.
Enhanced individuals show a 340% higher likelihood of pursuing careers in diplomacy, medical research, and interspecies cooperation compared to non-enhanced populations. Because they've experienced firsthand what it means to find strength in biological partnership, Sarah realized. They understand cooperation in ways that purely single-species individuals can't fully grasp.
Commander Velkov brightened with sudden understanding. Dr. Chen, you've created more than a medical treatment. You've created a population of beings whose nature predisposes them toward peaceful cooperation rather than conflict. Sarah felt a surge of wonder at the implications of what they had accomplished.
What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a dying creature had become the foundation for a new form of civilization based on biological cooperation rather than competition.
Zithara, she said, what do you see when you look at the future of symbiotic integration?
The enhanced creature settled into its communication position and produced vocalizations that carried emotional depth beyond simple words. I see a galaxy where biological diversity becomes a celebration rather than a source of fear. Where different species seek each other out not for conquest or exploitation, but for the opportunity to become more than they could be alone. I see children, whether born or created through integration, who grow up understanding that cooperation across species barriers is not just possible but natural. I see problems being solved by combined intelligences that no single species could address. The creature paused, then continued with harmonic overtones that spoke of hope and determination. I see a universe where the phrase us versus them becomes meaningless because us includes everyone willing to cooperate. Sarah looked around the office at her colleagues, 3 alien beings who had become not just professional partners but friends, and an enhanced creature whose existence proved that cooperation could transcend every biological barrier. Then, that's what we'll work toward, she said firmly. A galaxy where biological cooperation replaces biological warfare, where diversity is strength, and where every species has the opportunity to become part of something larger than themselves. The communication system chimed, indicating that the first consultation appointments were ready to begin. Sarah gathered her equipment and prepared to meet with beings from 3 previously unknown civilizations, each seeking their own path toward symbiotic enhancement and biological cooperation. As she headed toward the consultation chambers, Zithara fell into step beside her, moving with the grace and purpose that had become characteristic of successfully integrated beings. Dr. Chen, the creature said as they walked, thank you for refusing to give up on a dying animal carrying incurable parasites. Sarah smiled, remembering the desperate determination she'd felt when everyone else had been ready to abandon hope. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the most logical thing to do is believe in impossible solutions. Behind them, the viewing port revealed a galaxy where ships from dozens of civilizations traveled toward stations dedicated to biological cooperation, carrying beings who sought to discover what they might become when they stopped fighting their biological diversity and started celebrating it. The universe, Sarah reflected, had turned out to be far more cooperative than anyone had expected. It had just taken one stubborn human medic and one abandoned feline companion to show everyone how it was done.